Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Fun. I am with Common Cause, and I just wanted to welcome everybody to our session, Evaluating and Analyzing District Maps for Advocacy. We're so excited because we have a lot of participants who are already signing on, and excited to be able to share this information with you. We're going to be presenting this in 3 parts, and let me just invite my 2 co-presenters to say hello quickly.
Hi, this is Erin Casey, and I'm with State Voices.
Hi, I'm Kate Donovan. I'm here from the Redistricting Data Hub.
Hi, everybody.
Great.
My name is Sarah Andre. Oh, sorry about that. And I'm with Common Cause.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next slide. I think I'm experiencing a little bit of delay, so apologize everybody for sometimes the pauses. Here's what we're going to be learning about today. In this session, we're going to be covering how we can use district map evaluations to advocate for change. And we'll talk through where that fits in all of the other things that you've been learning with the Redistricting Community College and the charge training sessions. We'll bring on a panel, including Allison Riggs from Southern Coalition for Social Justice and Kate Donovan from Redistricting Data Hub to talk about the kinds of evaluation or analysis that can be done, and also what tools are out there to help us. And ask the very hard question, which is sometimes you can do it with some of the online free tools, and sometimes you might need some specialized help. And when is that? Then we will, next slide, break out into some special sessions where you can choose the breakout session to go into that will introduce you to the different mapping apps, next slide, that are available to be able to conduct some of those evaluations and analysis. So the 4 that we've invited are all ones that are free that you can find online. So DRA 2020. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
DRA 20, District R, Representable, and Plan Score. So as you learn a little bit more, you may decide that there are some that you really want to kind of get that deep dive into, and so you can choose one of those breakout rooms to learn more. Now, if you are interested in more than one, do not fret. Every single one of these apps has pretty great tutorials on their own sites, and so you can find out a little bit more about how to work with those other kinds of tools just by visiting their website. Next slide. Karen.
Great. So you might be asking yourself, where does evaluating map fit into your redistricting campaign? And for many of you, you have participated in the Redistricting Community College training, where we focused on drawing community maps, talked about the importance of building coalition, then taking the next step of working with that coalition to draw district and unity maps. This training is really focused on evaluating draft maps that are produced by governing body. Evaluating maps is an important tool to understand how the district lines were drawn by the governing body and how it matches your goals and expectations for community-driven voting maps. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how you can use these evaluations in advocacy. Next slide. Great, thank you. And there will be an opportunity between when the draft maps are released at a state or local level in the final vote, where your organization and coalition can still have influence on the final maps. You can use your analysis to give feedback on the draft maps during public testimony and during individual meetings with the decision makers. This allows you to make the case and how to improve maps. The second is to work with the media to tell your story that focuses on whether these draft maps help or hurt your communities. These analyses can help shift the narrative from politicians and parties to everyday people and ensure the focus on whether these are community-driven maps. And then the third way that this can help your advocacy is that it helps to build a case for courts to consider and lay the groundwork for your legal case. Next slide.
So the step one will be to collect the data and the lines. So the most important thing that you can do for step one is to ask the map makers for the data, and that includes the precinct shapes and the election data. And it is very important to ask for them as shape files. And shape files are data files that contain the boundaries for a particular area. They are used for mapping, and we can combine those with census data to get an understanding of how many people are within a certain proposed district. And combining election data and precinct data, we can see what are election results for particular precincts. So it's highly important to ask for shape files. That way, more so certainly than PDFs or even Excel files, we can truly understand the nitty-gritty of what we're looking at. And the next step will be to find people who can help with this particular detailed analysis. And people that you can ask, you can consider people from your local colleges or universities. These can be professors, grad students, or even talented undergraduates. You can look for people who have experience manipulating shapefiles, so people with GIS skills, Geographic Information Systems programs, like Esri, ArcGIS. And you can find these people with GIS programs, urban planning, environmental sciences, and certainly also people with political science, ethnic studies, economics, and public affairs programs will also have some of the skills needed to analyze redistricting. And you may also consider asking people who work for local government, urban or city planning departments who have these GIS skills, people who are math forward, who have programming experience, and just people who are good at taking complex information and detailed numbers and mapping information and channeling that into key points and articulate, concise storytelling to tell the stories about what's happening with the data.
So step three is making sure that we actually engage in the evaluation with a thought towards what our state or our local jurisdictions require. So here we've listed some of the very common criteria that are applied, and you'll find them sometimes in your state constitution, sometimes it will be from court cases, sometimes it will be in your city ordinances, right? In all cases, the first two will always apply to every jurisdiction, right? So the question about whether or not a district has an equal number, and then also whether or not there is a Voting Rights Act question. Both of those have to be analyzed in every jurisdiction. The rest of the criteria will depend on that jurisdiction. And some of them will say it out loud that that's a requirement. Some of them will do it, but it's an unspoken rule. And some of them will have court cases that have defined what the courts will be looking at. The things that we'll be focusing on today, we'll talk a little bit about the equal numbers. We'll talk about Voting Rights Act and communities of interest. And then certainly a lot of the mapping platforms that will we'll do a deeper dive in the breakouts. We'll be able to talk about how you can analyze some of those other factors. Next slide. Okay, so one of the first things that we always want to look at is whether or not districts have close to the ideal number of people as other districts. And folks will remember, if you've attended the Redistricting Community College training before, that you are taking the total population for that jurisdiction. So let's say it's the total population of the state. You're dividing it by the number of districts, and that gives you an ideal population. And depending on whether you're at the congressional level or you're looking at local and state districts, it will determine how close you need to be to that perfect ideal population. Congressional maps need to be much more exact in getting close to that equal population. state legislative and local district maps can be a little less exact. Next slide.
So this is an example of a map analysis of district total populations. And if you see here, this district here is about 188,000, while this one here is about 203,000. So this could be an example of how you could use a shapefile combined with 2020 census data to see concretely that two districts are not equal in population.
Another one of the important criteria that we'll want to think about, because a lot of our groups have been working on drawing community maps. So doing a community map evaluation is thinking about if I have all of those community maps put together, and then I overlay it with the lines of the proposed district maps. And those proposed district maps might be coming from your governing body, the state legislature or city council, might also be coming from a commission, or it might be coming from other organizations, right? And you'll want to ask the question, are there community splits? Are there communities that are put into districts that dilute their votes? And very specifically, if you could recommend changes, what changes to the lines would you advocate for to increase a community's voice? Next.
And so here's an example of proposed district lines from this year from Chicago, Illinois. And this is state house districts. And you can see here, looking at this neighborhood of Chicago, Inglewood, it is split into 1, 2, 3, 4 different state house districts. So once you overlay the district map lines with other things like neighborhoods, you can clearly see that communities of interest are split along these different house district lines.
Next slide. So step 4 is using the map evaluations after you've done different kinds of evaluations. So we talked about 2 of them, looking at population equality and then looking at communities of interest, but you'll remember that longer list. There are many different ones. And you'll use those map evaluations to advocate potentially for change, right? So when you're advocating, you'll want to highlight the places where the current or proposed lines do harm, right? You'll want to remember that you are advocating using the descriptions of communities, concerns, and counts. And if you've attended our previous redistricting community colleges, you'll remember that concerns and counts are really trying to find ways that you can tell the stories, not just of how, if the lines were to change, you could elect somebody different, but more importantly, how those would make a difference in terms of policy changes or better representation, because somebody could be more responsive to a community. And then counts are backing all of those concerns up with data. If you have alternative maps, you'll want to be as specific as possible about how those maps are different than the ones that are being proposed by the official body. If you don't have alternative maps, that's okay. You can just be specific about what needs to change. Remember that as you're talking about those changes, don't just say, we want to make sure that the neighborhood of Englewood is put all in one district. You'll want to refer to streets and places, things that can actually be found on the map, and say, we think that Englewood starts at this street and goes all the way east to that street, and north and south, what those bounds are. And it's important that these places that are within this community are all in one district, if that was your advocacy. You'll also want to use every single tool in the toolbox. So demanding transparency by asking for that data and those shapefiles, demanding that hearings for public input are actually real hearings where people are listening, and then talking to the media whenever you can. Again, you can use visuals like holding up maps, but you can also tell really compelling stories of impact, because all of those are things that can sometimes bring a legislature to the negotiation table because they don't want the bad press. Next slide.
So next up, we have 2 experts who will continue to highlight what type of evaluation should you be considering for your organization, your coalition, and what tools are available to allow you to do the evaluation. So the first speaker is going to be Allison Riggs. She's the co-executive director of the Southern Coalition for Social Justice and a leading expert in redistricting. The second speaker is Kate Donovan, who is the support lead with the Redistricting Data Hub and can really help you think through what tools are the best for you to use for your evaluations. Allison, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. And just to check, are my slide decks in this slide deck, or do I need to pull them up separately?
Keep moving, and your slides are in this slide, so we could save you the trouble.
Y'all are fancy. Well, it's so wonderful to be with you all today. Thank you for having me. And I know that as we're engaging in both assessing and developing maps that better represent our communities, there's a lot of information and it may feel like a lot. So I hope to the extent that any of this feels a little bit repetitive from what Kathy and others have covered before, it's because we want folks to have in their head a framework of the questions to be asking and the things to be looking at. So I'm going to talk about some of those questions to ask, things to flag, and then give you all like a case study from last cycle that is a great example of where community advocates were able to flag a legal problem. Next slide. So again, you heard from Sarah and others about the importance of getting the data and the maps for the district lines in place right now. It's worth reiterating, redistricting can be a comparative process and exercise. A lot of times, and actually with rare exception, most line drawers aren't starting from scratch. They're not starting from a blank slate. And so understanding what we have now, it helps us understand what new district lines will do. It's also a critically important tool for getting community engaged. To talk about redistricting in the abstract is very hard, but if you show a community the map of the districts that elect their school board members right now and ask them, what do they know about their representative? Do they know which neighborhoods are in each district? Can you help them identify where neighborhoods are so they start to get a better sense of how their communities are represented in that map? That will start, I promise you, I've seen it done before, that will start triggering more information that you'll find useful in an advocacy campaign. Folks will start articulating and chewing on what has worked for them in their current maps and what hasn't. And so that's really important. Be prepared to ask prompting questions as well. So once you get those shape files, once you get those benchmark or base, those are sort of the terms we've used, those maps, ask folks looking at them, who's elected from these current districts, who's not, who's run and been unsuccessful, what kind of experiences have you had, if you have had them, working on campaigns to elect the candidates of choice of voters of color. Ask folks to partner with you in understanding what the rules of redistricting are in your community. Largely, we talk a lot about state legislative rules, whole counties, communities of interest, to the extent those requirements are put in state law, but there can be county level or municipal level variation, and it's the asking the question that's really important. So engage folks with you in asking the question and coming up with the answer to the question. And then look at population changes. So I said starting with that benchmark or base map is important, and it's important because we want to understand how population has changed within those districts so that when we go into a public hearing on so-and-so county commission, we can understand that in fact, the district's lines as they've drawn are not significant enough, don't provide enough power and voice to voters of color. And that knowledge is what we can translate into talking points and advocacy points. But you should also be honest with communities about areas that are at risk for loss. I live in North Carolina, and Eastern North Carolina, which has has historically had a very significant African-American population, is losing population. I don't think it helps anyone to pretend that these demographic realities don't happen. And we can offset some of those losses by organizing and collaborating, coordinating, speaking with one voice. But folks have to know what they're up against in order to be able to do that successfully. So don't try and portray the demographic story through rose-colored glasses. Next slide. So here, much like what Kathy shared, these are some questions you want to ask yourself. So print this slide out, bring it with you, carry it with you when you're looking at a map. These are what I think, this is where I'm going to go terribly awry by making a sports analogy as someone who does not understand or follow sports all that well. But this is like one of those cases where an umpire or a ref is throwing a flag on the play and then they go look at the video replay, right? So these are things that are not per se wrong, but you should flag them for closer review. So it's what makes it so boring when the game stops and they're all the refs and umps or whoever are staring at the screen. If you see these things, it means it's worthy of asking more questions. So if you are looking at a map, whether it's school board, town council, city council, and particularly looking at that map compared to the previous one, and you see a lot of split precincts or split voter tabulation districts, that should send off some red flags. It may not be wrong, but you deserve to know why there are more split precincts. So flag that to ask the decision maker. If you see irregularly or non-compact shaped districts, particularly much more non-compact than in previous maps, this is a change, and it should raise some concerns. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, redistricting isn't always a beauty contest. The folks that have been historically excluded through the redistricting process for decades and decades don't always live in neat little squares, and creating political power for those communities might mean drawing a district that captures those voters who share commonalities, not live in a quote unquote pretty district. But abnormal, irregular line drawing can be used to crack and pack voters of color. And so throw that flag and go look at the video replay, ask the questions, and demand the answers that you deserve. Look for dramatic changes in populations in the districts when you get a map. So I'll use Texas as an example. In Texas last cycle, the population increased so much that Texas got 4 new congressional districts. 90% of that population growth was due to growth in communities of color. Yet those 4 additional congressional districts created no new additional opportunities for voters of color. So those congressional districts didn't really match up with the demographics. And we also saw where there were already districts electing candidates of choice, like Congressional District 30 in Dallas, represented by Eddie Bernice Johnson, we saw a dramatic jump in the Black voting age population in her district. So those are things to be worried about. Real quick, look for population patterns and ask yourself about them. You will probably, for the most part, see populations being within this 10% deviation, but we have seen numerous times of even within a 10% deviation from an ideal population, there's patterns of overpopulation and underpopulation, and that's my case study I will show real quickly in the next slide. But you can make a chart. You can say District 1, District 2, District 3, above 4.98%, minus 4.98%, and do all of the population deviations for all of them. It's math. I can do it on my calculator. It's not fancy math. But if you see a pattern that urban areas are systematically overpopulated and rural areas are systematically underpopulated, that could be indicative of a constitutional problem. And you should absolutely ask why those deviations are there and raise the alarm on that. Before we get to that real quick real life example, I want to talk about VRA compliance. As Kathy mentioned, there are some places and times where you're going to need to seek the input from voting rights attorneys, and we're working with the Charge Hub to make ourselves available. There's a number of groups that want to be a resource to you, but there are also ways in which you can do some of this preliminary analysis yourself as well. So a few things to think about in terms of the Voting Rights Act and complying with it. We're seeing some jurisdictions that are saying, oh, well, we're just going to not consider race at all. We're going to do this race blind. And generally, we don't believe that's the right way to do that. And that should immediately raise concerns and suspicions, because you can't address racial inequity in this country by ignoring the history of racism in this country. And this is just the folks who would suggest this are just taking it to the natural next step by saying we shouldn't consider race in redistricting at all. There is an appropriate use of race in redistricting. But one thing you may be able to do if you've used the tools or learn how to use the tools that are going to be covered in our breakout session, you can see if additional minority districts can be drawn. You may want someone to check, but you can do that. The next thing is you can do a gut check of whether there's racially polarized voting or not. We noticed racially polarized voting changing dramatically in North Carolina because candidates of color were losing in state legislative races. The margins of victory for candidates that were opposed by voters of color were dramatically increasing. And it's not the statistical study you'd need in a courtroom, but it's enough to say, hey, I think there's a problem here. So I want to keep us on time. My slides that we'll be sharing will have a case study. And if there's time, I can come back and address that in the Q&A. But otherwise, Kathy, I'll hand it back over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Allison, maybe you can leave those up on the screen while we switch over to Kate Donovan. And if folks have questions.
That's a donut district. A donut district may raise suspicions. It's not even a very tasty looking donut.
Not a tasty donut. And folks can save some of those questions for the Q&A afterwards, so you can pop it in there. And if somebody wants to ask a little bit more about the donut district, please do. Kate, you have the ability to share screen, so you can take over.
Yes, but I'll have to end Allison's, unfortunately. So I'm going to continue there and share. So hopefully you will see my slide. Yes, I was already introduced. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm Kate. I'm the support lead from the Redistricting Data Hub. Actually, it's really great because Kathy and Allison and I are all sort of touching on the same thing, but from a slightly different angle. And I think that's really helpful for understanding the complexity of some of these issues. So I'm going to also touch very briefly about the redistricting criteria that you see across states, and then also talk about which free mapping tools can be used to analyze and evaluate maps for those criteria. So as already been highlighted, there are 2 federal requirements that all states must comply with, the first being equal population. So if you are drawing or analyzing congressional maps, the standard is strict, as has already been noted, which is typically interpreted as essentially one person. If you are drawing or analyzing legislative maps, the standard is substantial equality, which has been defined as a 10% deviation from the ideal or target population in each district. Please do note that plans with deviations greater than these thresholds have been upheld in courts if there is a compelling justification for that deviation, such as meeting other traditional redistricting criteria. And also, states may adopt stricter population requirements for legislative districts than what is required at the federal level. For example, a couple states have thresholds of 5%. The second federal requirement is compliance with the Voting Rights Act. And this is a very complex topic, so I'm going to do my best without getting too in the weeds here. But in short, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits any standard practice or procedure that results in the denial of the right to vote on account of one's race, color, or membership in a language minority group. So this often gets shorthanded to, essentially this is a prohibition on minority vote dilution. Practically speaking, this means that protected minority groups should have an equal opportunity as majority groups to elect representatives of their choice. But how do you know if that's the case? Well, first you have to determine whether there is a protected minority group that is sufficiently large and geographically compact enough to form a majority minority district. And then, as Allison was alluding to, you have to analyze the voting patterns of the minority and majority groups to determine whether vote dilution has occurred. So the main point I'm trying to make here is that drawing a majority minority district, or the ability to draw a majority minority district, is necessary, but ultimately insufficient for fully assessing compliance with the Voting Rights Act. But it's an easy shorthand, and it's a lot easier than going through what are known as the jingles criteria and doing the racially polarized voting analysis. So it is definitely worth taking that first step. I'll also highlight this again in just a moment when we look to see which mapping tools can evaluate districts for which criteria. And then similar to the equal population rules, some states have adopted language similar to the Voting Rights Act, so that there are both federal and state protections against racial gerrymandering. In addition to the federal requirements, states also adopt a lot of their own criteria. And because states are adopting their own criteria, what I have on this slide are very broad categorizations. The specific wording is going to be different in every state. And so it is important that you look at the actual language that is being used by that redistricting body. So most commonly, states require compactness, meaning a compact form without long spindly pieces, and contiguity, meaning that you can trace the outline of an entire district with a pencil without picking it up. Many states also require respecting political or geographic boundaries, such as minimizing the number of county splits. Many states require redistricting plans to respect or take communities of interest and then into account, And then some states have language trying to limit or reduce partisan bias. Most commonly, this is a prohibition on favoring or disfavoring parties, candidates, or incumbents, but a few states do have criteria that mandate competitiveness, proportionality, or partisan fairness. So if you're sitting here wondering, what are the criteria in my state? I would recommend the All About Redistricting website. They have a criteria section on every state page with links to relevant case law. And also, some states have not yet adopted their criteria, and it's not too late to push the redistricting body to adopt certain ones, such as respecting communities of interest. So given the criteria in your state, how can you evaluate a map to see whether it is legally compliant? So I'm going to focus now on just the free tools that have metrics for analysis, in particular Districtor, DRA 2020, and District Builder, but also Plan Score when it comes to partisan gerrymandering. And at the end, I'll show you very quickly how you can consider other mapping tools and find out whether it has the metrics that you need. So first up, we'll just go through the list again. Population equality. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy one in the sense that most mapping tools can and do tell you what the populations of your districts are and calculate how much they deviate from one another. So that's available in Districtor, DRA 2020, and District Builder. I've already noted how evaluating a map for VRA compliance is a technically complex undertaking, and that examining the racial and ethnic makeup is the first but not only step in this process. So you can at least get that in Districtor, DRA 2020, and District Builder. And in some case, they also will provide the demographics of the voting age population. Contiguity is pretty straightforward as well. All three tools that I'm focusing on will do contiguity checks for you. DRA 2020 and District Builder also provide compactness scores. But I do want to note that there are a lot of different measures of compactness. So District Builder, for example, has Polsby-Popper. DRA 2020 has Polsby-Popper and REOC. But there's also length width and convex hull and lots of others out there that may or may not be acceptable measures of compactness in your state. When it comes to assessing how well a map respects existing political boundaries, both District Builder and DRA can tell you how many counties you split. And DRA also provides metrics on district splits, as well as some states do require respecting the core of prior districts. So I just have 2 more quick slides I'll run through quickly here. If you'd like to analyze a map for respecting communities of interest, DRA 2020 does have the ability to overlap a community of interest map with a district plan and check for splits. So that's pretty neat. And last but not least, language that attempts to limit partisan gerrymandering. Again, it can be difficult to assess. The Supreme Court has said there is no standard or metric they find acceptable as a measure of partisan gerrymandering. So there's a lot out there. Districtor provides a measure of proportionality. District Builder provides a measure of competitiveness. DRA 2020 calculates proportionality and competitiveness. And then Plan Score would be your best bet if you're really interested in this issue, since they have 4 different measures of partisan gerrymandering there. Last thing I'll just say here, and then I'll wrap up, is that if you have other questions about these tools or are interested in looking at other mapping tools, I would recommend going to redistrictingdatahub.org and finding our Choose Your Own Mapping Tool feature. It allows you to basically sort and filter a table that has information regarding 12 of the most commonly used mapping tools out there. And it will give you a lot of information, not only about metrics, but other kinds of support languages that are available, and so on. One more thing I'd just like to note that Districtor, DRA 2020, District Builder, and Representable all have built-in collaboration features available if you're working with an organization. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Kate. So what we want to do is take a few minutes to allow people to ask questions. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. After we do that, and these questions should really be focused for the speakers, so Kate, Allison, Kathy, and Sarah. Afterwards, we're going to go out, we're going to create breakout rooms for people to be able to talk directly to the representatives from the 4 different platforms. So the first question up, and I think this is a great question for you, Allison, to answer, is from Taryn from Common Cause. And so let me just make sure I read it to you, Allison, and I hope you can answer this. So Taryn says, I have heard that a city has historically made sure Black voters don't have enough political power to elect a state senator who actually represents their needs. And I want to be able to figure out and analyze what that looks like in the current draft maps. Do you have recommendations on how to approach that?
Absolutely. So there are tools on some of the ones you'll practice on, but I know for DRA, where you can take the city or the county and shade by Black voting age population concentrations, and then open up I think you said it was the state Senate. I would open up the state Senate shapefile or district lines and see how those lines treat where we see Black population in that city, I think you said. So you might see that the district lines crack, divide, if there's a heavy population of Black voters in the eastern part of the city, that may be a historic Black community. If the Senate district lines split that up in 3 different ways, that's probably confirmation or evidence, at least, of that the problem you've noticed or heard about is actually a thing. And so then you can start drawing new Senate district lines that don't fracture that Black population. Now, you might find that's not the case, right? You might find actually it looks like every Black voter in the city is sort of segregated into one Senate district. That can still be about diluting the strength of Black voices, but it's more of a packing strategy. And so that's a little bit more challenging, challenging an exercise to play around with redrawing, because you want to make sure that while you unpack Black voters, that you're not inadvertently creating situations where Black voters won't be able to elect any candidate of their choice. But those are things that real quick, get the shape file, or if it's state senate, it should already be in DRA or one of the other tools. Set the shading to be Black voting age population, probably 20%, like 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. And it'll shade it and give you a little grid about explaining that. And then you'll be able to see how the district lines affect where voters of color live.
Great, thank you, Allison, and great question. So this question is for Alex. We are recommending that people ask for shape files, and Alex Ramsey is suggesting another kind of file. Alex, can you share more with the group?
Sure. I mentioned on the chat about asking for what's called a block assignment file, which is another way that districts are frequently specified and is a pretty useful interchange format between different tools. And it's basically just a CSV file that lists all the blocks in a state, census blocks, and then what district they're assigned to. And unlike a shapefile, there's really not any ambiguity in the processing. When you get a shapefile, you've got to do some magic work. Shapefiles are useful, don't get me wrong, way better than PDFs. But we've just found that block assignment files are that much more precise because they tell you exactly what blocks are going to be in what districts, and you don't have to do any guessing and any cleaning up.
Great, thank you. So does anyone else have any questions that you want to either let us know, ask to be unmuted, or ask in the chat?
And if we don't have any more questions, what we might be able to do, because we have just a little bit of time, is to ask each one of our free platform presenters to maybe just say a quick word about your platform so people can know which breakout room to drop into. And yeah, fantastic. Sarah, you were reading my mind. So why don't we go in the order of these breakout rooms? So if you are interested in Dave's redistricting app, DRA 2020, choose number 1, and we'll give you that choice at the end. But go ahead, Alec.
I think I'm unmuted now. So I'm going to answer whatever questions you have, but I'll start off by giving you 5 or 10 minute overview of all the surface area of analytics in DRA. And there's quite a bit of what the speakers have already talked about. We've got pretty much all of that and more. So I'll show you quickly how you can draw maps in communities. I'll show you about getting basic district information, how you can rate maps on 5 key dimensions, how you can understand trade-offs in a state's political geography, and how you can really dive deep if you want to really roll up your sleeves and to mix metaphors and really understand a dozen or so partisan metrics. I'll walk you through all of that at a high level and then answer whatever questions you have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Next up is Chanel Richardson with the District R platform. Chanel, you want to just say a few words?
Yep. So basically within the breakout room, a similar format, I will give an overview of the tools that we have on our site for evaluating maps and tell you a little bit about how to open maps up on our site and show you where you can find information about the file formats we take and that you can export. And then of course, I will spend some time answering any questions that you may have about the tool.
And then next up from Representable is Michaela and I think Kyle. So I'm going to see if I can get his screen up as well. But Michaela, get started.
Totally. So Representable is a free tool for mapping communities of interest. It's open to the general public. Active.
Hello. Do you want me to talk about Plan Score?
Yes, I think that Representable got a little bit, the sound got a little choppy. So Kyle, do you want to jump in?
if Michaela cut off for anyone else. So I'll pick up where Michaela left off real quickly. So Representable is all about communities of interest. So it's a communities of interest mapping platform, but we also provide all of these communities of interest for anyone to download and view. So in our breakout room, we'll be talking about specifically community representation, how to use communities of interest, understand communities of interest as they relate to old district plans and new district plans. And then thinking about advocacy when it comes to getting communities engaged in participating in redistricting from the communities of interest lens. And then I'll pass it over to Ruth Greenwood.
Thank you, Kyle. Hey, so I'm Ruth. I helped to develop Plan Score, mostly because I told the people that are really good with data that it was a great idea and let them do it. I will go over briefly the historical stuff that's on Plan Score. So you can see going back to 1972, the 4 measures of partisan unfairness for almost every state house, state senate, and congressional plan. And then I'll show you also how you can upload your own plan and see essentially a report that you can hopefully submit as legislative testimony that sets out the likely partisan outcome of those districts. It also includes the total population and the Black, Asian, and Latino CVAP using the 2019 ACS data. So I will show that all to you. There's also a library feature coming. One of the question is asked about where you can get a sort of where are the shapefiles being held. I'm going to go through where I would find shapefiles and to upload them onto Plan Score, but because everyone's looking for the same ones, like last night when Illinois came out, I sent the KMZ file over to our Plan Score guy and said, can you analyze this? And he converted it and said, oh, we better make it so you can put KMZ files on Plan Score. So that's coming. But then there'll just be a library function. So you can go to the library, select your state, and it'll show you basically plans that are proposed in the process. We're also going to put up like good government plans from groups like the League and Common Cause and so on. And so that you'll easily be able to just find them. You don't have to run those analyses. So I'm just going to go over all of that.
Great. I feel like this is a little bit like American Idol where you get to vote for your favorite contestant. But what I'll just say is that we will have, I think, besides the 4 breakout rooms, some of us can stay in the main room. So if you've got some additional questions and you want to ask those of the panelists, or you need a little bit more information before you can decide on your breakout room, do not fret. You will still be in a main room to figure some of those things out. Okay, so I'm going to ask Sarah to come back on and guide us through how to choose the breakout rooms. People are voting in chat. I think that there's another way to choose it. So,
all right. So, let me know with a thumbs up or in the chat if you see below on the bottom panel where it says mute, stop video, etc., if you see the breakout rooms button. I can't see your faces.
A lot of people
are all saying no.
Oh, no.
Should we let them choose their own room? We can say let participants choose your own and then create.
You know what? I didn't open up the rooms. Do you see them now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this slide that I have up here will tell you how to assign yourself or how to choose a breakout room for yourself. I am going to put our presenters in their designated rooms, and I can go back and forth between the previous slide. Let me see if our presenters could join themselves to their assigned rooms. Room 1 will be Dave's Redistricting. Room 2, let's see.
Can we pull up the slide again so that people can see the 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yes.
Cool. There you go.
And as we said previously, you can hop between rooms. So if you want to stay in room 1 for a little bit, get some information, then hop into room 4, you will be able to do that. And I see it looks like we have a question from Glory. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Okay, thanks. I was asking about the names of each of the rooms. I see rooms 1, 2, 3, but I don't see the heading of those rooms. So I'm able to pick the one I want to go into. Thanks.
Yeah,
Well-
so on the PowerPoint, you'll see we list out the different breakout
okay.
rooms.
Okay.
So room 1 will be Dave's redistricting and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just say it out loud so everybody can kind of hear it too.
Yeah,
One is-
definitely.
Yeah. 2 is District R. 3 is representable. And 4 is plan score. Noe,
And it
you've
looks-
got a question? Unmute yourself.
Sorry if I'm missing something obvious, Sarah. How do I know if I'm in the right room as a presenter?
Sorry, was this for Alec?
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Alec. I don't
Oh, no
see
worries.
where I'm assigned to. I don't know how to see what room I'm in.
Yeah, no worries.
should be-
Click.
Go ahead.
Okay. On the bottom panel, if you pop up the breakout rooms, you'll see all of them listed out. Just hover over room 1 where it says 19 and click join.
I'm not getting any join.
I can manually assign you.
If you
Possibly,
would,
let me
that'd be
see.
great. Yeah, because I'm not getting any join.
Alma, you have a question. Which one is QGIS redistricting? I'm not sure. Some people might need some manual assignments. And Alvin, if you've got that power, could you try assigning Gloria Aparicio to number 3? And Monica Chevel to number 4? Alma cannot unmute. Okay, we'll figure you out. Some people are asking for hand assignments. Are we able to do that?
Yes.
And for those of you who aren't sure where you want to go, or maybe you just want to ask some harder questions of some of the other panelists, we'll stay in the main room. Yes, we are still in the main room, and we can answer those questions or help get you assigned. So we're trying to put you all in. If you think you know what you want and you can't figure out how to do the breakout, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a bunch of icons, and towards the right, maybe the third from the right, is one that's called Breakout Rooms. And if you click on that, it should give you lots of choices. And so if you are trying to get in, just use the chat and tell us what room you're trying to get into. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think we've gotten everybody who wanted to be manually assigned. Sarah, you've been doing that, is that right? I think you've caught up. So do we have the ability to unmute everybody?
Yes, we do. Let me do that.
I am going to assume that if you are in this room, you meant to be in this room and you want to continue talking with us, which is okay. If there's still somebody who needs to be reassigned, I see Kia Sagami is asking to be assigned a 3. Looks like a lot of people are getting assigned fairly quickly, so thank you. Okay. How are we doing in terms of unmuting folks?
So I just sent a request for everyone to unmute themselves. So Amari, Lydia, Laura, Rudy, Daniel, Jade, if you want to ask any questions. Oh, Lydia says she just joined. So we are in, let me go back to the previous slide. All of our participants are in breakout sessions to get more information about these 4 redistricting apps. So if you would like to be assigned to a particular room, let me know and I can put you in one.
Otherwise, what we can do is go through some questions that people might have for the panelists who are still in the main room. And maybe just to get everything started, I think Allison is still in this room. I could ask Allison, hey, we could go back to slide number 18 and find out everything that you want to share about the donut bowl.
The donut.
The least tasty donut you've ever tried.
It was a bad donut, and I spent the better part of a decade litigating over a donut, and no one gave me donuts, so it was very sad. So here's an exercise in issue spotting that has at least 2, potentially 3 things that should have raised flags, and in fact did raise red flags. Prior to the release of the 2010 census data in 2011, the map on the left was the 9-member, single-member district plan for electing members of the Wake County School Board. Wake County is where Raleigh, North Carolina is. It's a capital city and county. And this wasn't something that the school board did themselves. It's something the legislature imposed on them. So generally speaking, also maybe a flag, except for Georgia. Georgia's a little bit more complicated. But what we saw is they combined these 2 maps they took this one map and made it into 2 maps. So they created 7 single-member districts and 2 super districts so that everyone voted on 2 members of the school board. And, you know, that sounds like a good talking point. Oh, you get to vote for 2 members instead of 1 member. But in reality, what this did, especially with the super districts, A and B, which are the ones on the right, District A included the most heavily concentrated census blocks with Black and Latinx voters, and it was plus 4.98% overpopulated. Super District B, the green one, was negative 4.8% underpopulated and included all of the rural and very heavily white suburban areas in Wake County. And so the overall deviation, looking at the super districts map, was 9.8%. But they packed every voter they could, especially voters of color, into District A, and really favored District B over District A. We saw some of that too in the single member districts where if you look at 3 and 4 in particular, those districts were overpopulated. District 7 and 1 were very underpopulated. And so you can just make a chart looking at the populations and the deviations in each of these districts and know there's a problem. So the 3 flags, the legislature forced its way into a process that they shouldn't have been. There was a major change in systems of in election. So this would be like, almost like if you're talking about adding an at-large seat, throwing a flag on that and asking questions about why are we adding an at-large seat, and systematic overpopulation and underpopulation to favor certain groups, voters, and geographies. So that's the very bad donut that no one loved, and it wasn't outweighed by any good donuts. Feel free to ask any questions or just stare at donuts.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so you guys are, you know, a lot of this is really statistical and detailed and absolutely fabulous. And I keep thinking, what could I best do to help? And from my point of view, I'm in Dallas, Texas. There are lots of problems with redistricting in Texas, as you well know. I would like to be able to partner with someone who can give me a sort of consensus of what would really work well in Texas and why it would work, and then be part of the effort to tell the story, explain, publicize, whatever, to make it clear how the ideal situation is far better than what's being put out there. So yeah, that's my question. So I don't really think that I would be the best one to use all of this software in general to come up with a good solution, but rather would work really well with someone who has done it and can explain it to me, and maybe, other people that I would work with, to dramatize the message.
So I would recommend connecting with a group called Fair Maps Texas. It's actually a coalition of Common Cause Texas, League of Women Voters Texas, Texans Against Gerrymandering. I think there's 10 groups now. Texas Civil Rights Project, ACLU of Texas, March to the Polls. I'm not going to be.
Let me start again. This is Fair Districting.
Fair Maps Texas. And I can drop the link in the chat for their website, but sign up for their action alerts. But there's a lot of people and a lot of politics in Texas. And so sort of ascertaining the consensus standpoint is difficult unless you're really looking at a coalitional effort. And I think those groups, including Common Cause Texas, have really put in the labor to do the coalitional work. There still won't be just a one sort of consensus. And so, but sign up for their alerts. And I think these are groups that have been turning people out to public hearings, have been trying to create materials that make redistricting much more accessible. And that's sort of how I would plug in, because they'll have different levels for different folks and different talents.
So you would plug into Fair Maps Texas, or one of the groups within Fair Maps?
I mean, I would go right to Fair Maps Texas, but any of those groups are part of that coalition. It just may be easier to sign up for, and Lydia, yay, Lydia's here. So Lydia can drop a link. Lydia's group is very much a leading partner in Fair Maps Texas, but doing coalitional work is very hard, and it's very hard in a state as big as Texas, and they're doing the work. So Lydia, do you have the website link that you could provide to Laura very quickly?
Laura, do you want a website or do you want a Facebook page?
Both.
Both? Okay, so 2 Facebook pages that will keep you informed. One is Fair Maps Texas. There's a community page for that. There's also, our group has Texans Against Gerrymandering. I'll put it in the chat. #TAG, TAG is our Facebook page, Texans Against Gerrymandering #TAG. We, our unique approach is to provide graphics for the public to use. So whatever information is being disseminated, we put it into graphic form, and you can distribute it, copy it, use it wherever you need, right? So those 2 pages are critical. We help each other out with messaging, as well as our group conducts a lot of training in different aspects That's why I was late to this meeting. I was doing some training on testimony that's coming up, right? And we do training on messaging. We do training on how to talk about community districting, how to talk about what is a fair and open process in community districting, all of that. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat box, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I've also included my phone number, okay?
Okay.
So feel free to contact me.
Okay. Is there within the messaging group, I mean, are there people who are like creative types, you know, who do drawings or cartoons, or who do little dramas? What, I guess that's what I'm really wanting to know is
if you get in touch with me, I will send you on Thursday. We are having a meeting with what we call the Big Tent Group, where we have other organizations that are involved in different types of issues join us and plan how they participate in the coming process. And among them, we have different types of individuals. That meeting is scheduled for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I mean, Thursday morning. So if you give me your email address, I can send you the link to register for that meeting, and you can hook up with different types of people there.
okay, wait. Okay, wait a minute.
Okay, so we have a few people who are jumping in and out of the rooms, and so I just want to be sure. If you've jumped into this room and you were looking to kind of jump into, you can join us for this conversation, or you can go back to the breakout icon at the bottom of your screen and choose a different room. There are 4 sessions that are going on right now that I've kind of done a quick check-in with, and I think folks are still going on, so feel free to. If you have joined the main room and you do have some questions for folks like Kate and Allison and Erin and Sarah, please feel free to pop those up, and you can put those in the chat if you're feeling for some reason shy. I know that redistricting is not necessarily the realm of shy people, but in case you are, otherwise you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself and just ask questions. Thank you, Tanya. Hopefully it answers some of the questions that you were looking to try to get a handle on. And I see Lydia is sharing her contact. Kia wants to go to room 2. So let's see if we can do that. I think Sarah is magically getting everybody into the right room. Is that right, Sarah?
Give me 1 second. I'm going to refresh my breakout rooms.
So one of the questions that I think some people had asked, you know, how do you tell the difference? And many people have already chosen something, but District R does now have a voting rights dashboard that allows them to analyze the possibility of creating district plans and evaluating them using that dashboard. Dave's redistricting app is very helpful for kind of pulling together analysis across many different criteria and then comparing them to sort of see which one might do a little better on one criteria but not another. Representable is built to try to take the community of interest maps and overlay the proposed districts to see how the COI maps compare to what the proposed maps are, as is Districtor. And then Plan Score is really designed to be able to evaluate primarily how a map is doing in terms of partisan fairness, though they do have other ways to analyze maps. I'm just talking until somebody's got a question. Unless you were just here to keep us company. Kate, I'm wondering for those people who are in the room, and it looks like it's more than just us. I saw today a really fantastic set of materials that Redistricting Data Hub is putting together for, right now their focus is on 29 different states to create some basic comparisons. So, and this seems like it's pretty fantastic if you don't have, you know, a demographer on staff, that to go through state by state and kind of see what those population changes are and kind of where there are particular growth or shrinking of populations by race or ethnicity. I don't know, Kate, if you have the ability to share any of that online. And if folks are still trying to get into a breakout room, you can ping us in the chat and tell us which one you want to go to.
Yeah, I just put in the chat a link to the population change reports. Kathy already said this, but yeah, we don't have them for all 50 states. They're only for, they were produced by Haystack DNA, and they produced them for a set of priority states. And then we are rehosting them. So if you don't see your state up there, it may be possible for them to produce a report. I'd be happy to pass along the request at least, but I don't want to make any promises. But yeah, they're pretty nice in terms of distilling some of those population changes, both in tabular form, right, just like the actual numbers in the table, and then also in graphs or maps, really.
And I'm not seeing any additional questions coming up, so I'll just try sharing screen and we can take a look at some of those reports. And I saw them for the first time today and they were pretty neat. So this is from the Redistricting Data Hub website. And I guess these are the state-by-state reports that Haystack DNA produced. And these are some of the states that they produced those reports for. I'm not sure if anybody wants to nominate a state for us to click into.
How about Texas?
How about Texas?
Yes.
Texas never has any problems. Why are you interested in Texas? They're never a problem state. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Okay, so Kate, I'm not sure how comfortable you are in reviewing this, or if you'd like me to bumble through it. I will say that we got some of a kind of an overview of this, where basically it was they did some overviews of the population, and then they overlaid the lines for at least 3 levels of government: congressional, Senate, and House. And that's true for every one of the states that they've gone into. They also do zoom-ins of heavily populated areas like cities or concentrations. And I'm happy to just keep going unless, Kate, you want to jump in.
No, that's pretty good, actually. I haven't spent a ton of time looking around at the reports myself, so okay. I haven't looked at Texas yet.
I saw this approximately 2 hours ago, but this is a population change, and so kind of where your growth is for the state, and the larger, the deeper the purple, the more the growth. See, kind of it's where
I
have
a question we were looking at the population counts and the breakdown of the different groups between District R, DRA 2020, and the census data. And we found that there were some discrepancies in the numbers that were different from the census data on these two applications. Why is that?
Okay, so one of the things to just double check with them really quickly, and I'll figure that out, is some of them still had they have not yet loaded the new census data up, and they were still relying on the old ACS data, and they were in the process of sort of cleaning it up before they loaded it. So you may be just caught in a transition time between sort of loading the new data. The only other reason that I can think of is that in some states, not Texas, but in some states, they may be doing some reallocation of people who are incarcerated to their last known address, or doing some other kinds of cleanup data of the data. So Hawaii does that for non-residents; they take them out. But for a state like Texas, it should the raw number that census is giving for the total number of people in the state should be the same as what you will see on those platforms, and we can just ping them and ask them if they've got the latest data up yet. Some of them are still scrambling to kind of get it all up and ready. That's all I can guess.
Yeah, if I could add on, Kathy, DRA 2020 has 2020 census data, so they should match. But I popped into Districtor just now and looked at Georgia just as an example, and it says 2020 census data on VTDs. So that may be another thing to double check on, just that you're looking at the same level of geography in addition to the same year. Because maybe if you're looking at census blocks,
Can you explain what a VTD is?
Yes, a VTD being a voting district. It's a unit of geography that the Census Bureau uses. They can be, but are not guaranteed to be the same as precinct boundaries in a state in a particular year.
Yeah,
I put in the chat box an example of one of the discrepancies that we found with between DRA and what the redistricting data from the census was. And this is what we're trying to figure out.
Okay. Why don't we do this? I think what we could do is try to pop some of those numbers into a chat with the DRA folks and just ask them. So maybe while we're doing that, Sarah, if you have that ability to pop into the breakout room #1 and just ask them, that would be super helpful. I'm just going to keep going through Redistricting Data Hub's maps that they've drawn. This is one that's now starting to show kind of percentage change by ethnicity or race. And here, this is sort of showing where the greatest growth for Latinos is, or Latinx, or Hispanics, depending on what phrase you use and what state you're in. This is for African Americans. You can see darkest green is where you've got the fastest growing population. And then this is for Asian American non-Latino. And then lastly, no, I don't know that and then following that are the actual numbers. So if you're trying to double check things. So Lydia, what I would say is that the RDH's numbers and these reports are probably ones that you can start with as a baseline to be sure, and then to check in with the platforms to ask them why the numbers are maybe a little bit different. And they might have an explanation, which could just be sort of choosing the right function. And I'm sorry that I don't have the easy answer for your question.
It's okay.
And Lydia, oh, sorry. I was going to say, I put this in the chat, but just to highlight, please email info@redistrictingdatahub.org too. I mean, this is the kinds of questions that we like to answer, and just, kudos to you for being very, very careful and looking at the numbers and making sure that everything makes sense. So we definitely want to get to the bottom of that.
Good.
Okay.
This is another set of maps that are showing the change in total population. So again, they just kind of go through this and then they do it by ethnicity or race, right? So you can kind of see where those changes are. And then right after that, then each state will have certain metropolitan areas that are heavily populated. And so they'll show that same data, change in population, and then change by race or ethnicity for those cities. So here, I think they start with Fort Worth, or Dallas-Fort Worth, I guess I should say. And they're just showing kind of where the geographies are, where there's most change. So the darker the purple, the more the change. And I'm guessing if I keep scrolling, I'm going to get to Houston, yes, and then eventually maybe San Antonio or El Paso. And they have the underlying data for all of that. I'm going to stop sharing, but you get the general idea, which is that they've gone through at least 29 states with that data. So if you're interested in that, you can pull that off the RDH website. We have a few more people who have joined us, perhaps from the other rooms. If you meant to drop into one of the other trainings in the breakout rooms, we can drop you in there. Otherwise, we've got the main room where we're just going over some additional information now that we've completed the main part of the training. People can pop questions into the chat box to ask, and we'll try to figure out if we can answer them or find the right people to answer them if we can. And if really what you were intending to do was to go to one of the breakout sessions, I'll repeat that. At the bottom of your screen, there is a bar of icons, and the third from the right is the breakout rooms icon. Breakout number 1, room number 1 is Dave's redistricting app. Breakout room number 2 is for District R. Breakout number 3 is for representable. And breakout number 4 is for plan score. And it looks like they're still meeting. So looks like maybe breakout number 2 has ended, but 1, 3, and 4 are still talking. So feel free to join those, or you can stay in our big room. If you've got questions for Kate Donovan from Redistricting Data Hub, Allison Riggs from Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Aaron Casey from State Voices, myself, Kathy Sung, or Sarah Andre from Common Cause. Don't make me say that again. I won't be able to. We've got some folks who are on the line who are real good, also good resources. If you're interested in asking each other questions, you can pop those into the chat or just come off of mute and share. I was very interested in this question about whether we should be asking for shapefiles or block group assignment, I think was what it was, or yeah, block group assignment. And I'm interested if our experts have any opinion on that.
I think we at SCSJ generally ask for a block assignment file as well. Importing it tends to be a little bit cleaner and neater. Sometimes with a shape file, there's a little bit of mismatch around the edges, but that being said, shape files and the descriptions of them are a little bit more intuitive. And so that's been something that I think folks have that's a word that resonates with them. And so bottom line is we're getting the information. But I can tell you SCSJ asks for block assignment files.
Super helpful, thank you. Another question is, if people are, if the groups are trying to get information, are there some states that are already sharing things like, or more likely to share things like shapefiles and block group assignments of the maps that they're proposing, and other states that are harder to get it from?
Kate here. We have not tried to obtain shape files or assignment CSV files for proposed districts. It was really great to see the website that Ruth mentioned today. But I can say that we have been requesting other types of information, including data from the states, and there is definitely a lot of variation. Some states make it really, really easy on you and will even just post things on the website, whether it's the commission's website or something else. And other states are, you know, in some cases, those states are difficult to get answers from because they haven't really got into the redistricting process yet. Like we know there are some states that have basically push this back to 2022. They may still be difficult in 2022, but one thing I just will mention that we do also have and can share upon request is every state has a nonpartisan census liaison. This is a person that the state identifies as an official receiver of the state and as a nonpartisan individual to receive this state. And those folks would be a good starting point for questions about data. So if you are trying to find that information and that's not something that's readily available by, you know, on any of the folks that are on this call, we can try to at least help you get started in the right place.
Great. Ryan is asking whether or not some of the free mapping apps allow you to see age data. And what I'll say is that the age data that you're going to get is not from the 2020 census because, you know, the 2020 census did not ask about, well, what they've got is sort of plus 18 or under 18. But what the much more detailed census data on age will come from the American Community Survey. And I do know that District R has that as an overlay choice for many states, not all states. But then within the redistricting related census data, because you have plus sort of 18 and above or not 18, that can tell you some stuff. Unfortunately, it's a challenge if what you're trying to do is you could identify very young populations, but it doesn't allow you necessarily to isolate college aged, which is what I gather Ryan's question is about. So for that, you will need ACS because you need to have the breakdown. I'm guessing that you're looking for something like 18 to 21-ish, right? As I said, I think District R has that as an overlay choice. And there may be some others like Representable that also have that as a choice. It's basically as you're pulling up, for instance, mapping your communities or districting on the districting side, you can click on a button and it'll show you that it'll give you the option of bringing up age as one of the overlays. And if you're not seeing it for the state that you're interested in, you can always ping folks at Districtor or Representable. And they'll oftentimes work with you to pull out some of those overlays and make that as a feature that you can turn on for the states that you're interested in. Hope that answers your question, Ryan. And Ryan, if that didn't, you are more than welcome to come off mute and ask us more. Okay. Yeah, Sarah, I think we're coming to a close towards the end of our session. So if you want to send a message to everybody, just saying that be ready to wrap up in, I guess, 3 to 5 minutes. And that will mean that anybody who's on this main session also, we're going to be wrapping up. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. You've got all of these experts at your fingertips right now. Yes, Allison, fine if you need to just jump right now. I think we're closing in on the end. We're just letting people have a chance to ask questions if they have them. We have quite a few folks who are in the main room, and I just want to be sure that if anybody had any questions that they wanted to ask of our panelists, now that you've rejoined the main room, you're more than welcome to. It is also the end of the session, so feel free if you're ready to sign off. And for those of you who missed it, there are some additional resources that are out there. I'm just going to say that if you are trying, so we will send out an email to everybody who attended this session with a recording of the session as well as the slide deck. So you'll get that. If you are interested in seeing some of the previous trainings, they should all be loaded on the redistrictingcommunitycollege.com website. That's what our whole series is called, that Charge puts together. And then also, if you're interested in some of the upcoming trainings, those should also be on that website. But I'll just tell you that on Thursday, there's a messaging training. And on September 15th, there will be a total repeat of the Redistricting Community College session en Espanol. For anybody who's interested, you can sign up there. And if you're not finding it easily, you can also ping any one of us at the top. So Erin, Casey, Sarah, Andre, or myself, Kathy Fung, and we'll get you those invites in time. And I think a lot of people have come back from the main session. So if you've got any last burning questions, please throw them into the chat. Otherwise, we would just want to thank you for joining. It's been a real pleasure. And then if you're looking for additional resources, we're putting up our emails right here so you can ask people directly. Thank you so much. Thanks for the love. You all are doing the hard work. Thank you, Sarah, for managing all of our tech behind the scenes. And thanks, Kate, for staying on with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Our numbers are going down, so I think we can say goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Go pick up your kids, have lunch, have breakfast, whatever time zone you're in. Bye.
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 Bye, Alex. Bye, Sarah. Bye, Loretta.
Bye.
Alec is still giving really important information, so I guess we shouldn't.
I
end yet.
know. I was in his room. I didn't want to leave. I'm gonna have to email him.
One more piece of information.
Yeah, we gotta do this
Alec,
again soon.
One of the people did ask. Oh, maybe he's dropped out already. Are you still there, Alex? Let's see. Somebody was asking. They thought that they were seeing the number for the total population in the state looking a little different from what they were seeing on the census website, and looking for an explanation for why that might be.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure if you want me to answer that in this context or in the breakout. So I answered it in the breakout, but I'll do it again. So just so you know. So what I said there was, well, A is I really can't tell unless we can actually see what they're seeing. But in general, there are two different issues to think about. One is there's multiple time slices of the same data. So there's 2018 ACS data, 2019 ACS data, official census data for 2020, and then there's the adjusted data for, like moving prisoners around in the state. And so even for a specific value like the total population, there can be 4 different time slices or more than 4 different time slices for that same data. And so the first thing you got to do is make sure the two tools are actually pointing at the same data sets. The second thing is you got to make sure that they're pointing at the same fields in that data set. So total population is the biggest number. That's everybody that's counted. Then there's voting age population, which is only the people 18 and above. And then there's citizen voting age population, which is only citizens 18 and above. And so you've got to make sure that the two tools are actually looking at the same fields as well. And so without being able to see the discrepancy that people are seeing, it's really easy to be looking at two different things and have numbers seeming not to line up, but it's because the two tools or the two maps, even within DRA, are pointing at different data sets or different fields within the data sets. So.
Okay. I'm looking through the chat because I think what we might do is just connect you directly with the person who asked that question, and maybe you all can talk directly about sort of what she's looking at. She seems to have been digging in quite a bit, so I want to be sure that we're, and she's asking the question specifically about Texas, I believe. So
About Texas?
Yeah.
I just saw
like that was Lydia Ozuna.
Yeah. We can hold on to her information and maybe just pass it to you offline.
Just have her send the question to feedback@Dave's Redistricting.
Okay, cool.
And the more specific she can be on, you know, I think I see this in that tool, or and that in this other tool, or in these two different maps, you know, within DRA, whatever. The more specific, the better, and we'll definitely try to help her out.
I'm not sure if everybody got to see this before. Let me see if I still have it up. I do want to just share with everybody that, let me go backwards. Redistricting Data Hub just came out with this set of 29 reports for 29 states. Okay, so you can see at the top, it's redistrictingdatahub.org, and then a bunch of backslash. But if you go to redistrictingdatahub.org, you'll be able to find it. And here, I'm just going to scroll down here. They did 29 different states. And for each one of those states, they do a nice little zoom in of some basic population information. And so I think I saw Loretta being interested in Texas, and I'll just pull up Texas one more time so you can see it. This is the report that they have on Texas. And so just as an example, if we look at their congressional report, they show, hey, here's what the total population is and where that growth is happening, right, in the darker purple. And then they do it by ethnicity and race. So they give you the numbers, but then they also do it by ethnicity and race. And so if my screen will load, you'll be able to see the same for, this is non-Latino white, and then Latino, and then Black, right? So just letting you know that there's some additional resources out there just for basic population changes if you want to see where the big growth is. They do, towards the end of the report, just going to, spoiler alert, they also have zoom ins on specific city or major metropolitan areas. So this is like the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Okay. That's your last bit of tidbit. I think we should say thank you very much. Good night. Hope that's everything that you wanted to know about analysis and evaluation. If you've got any additional questions, please feel free to ask us by emailing us. Thanks, everybody.